Duke University.
Hi there. I am Kristin Henning. I go by Chris, and I am originally from Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and I graduated from Duke in 1992. I live in the Washington, D.C. area, right outside of D.C. in Tacoma Park, Maryland now. There was so much to love about Duke, but I would definitely say my classmates, the students at Duke, and I'm thinking about the Black Students Association. I'm thinking about an opportunity. I pledged Delta Sigma Theta, but it wasn't just about Duke and Deltas. It was about Duke and the Pan-Hell, the Panhellenic community. And even beyond that, it was about all the Duke students all the Duke Black students really understanding that we were in this together. So that for me was probably the absolute best thing about Duke, for me.
That's really cool. Well, this is kind of sidetracked, but I'm from Durham, and so I like have always been like a fan of Duke, and like my dad is
So
like,
I was an English African American studies major. So when you ask like what was the best thing about Duke, definitely my classmates and the community that I was in. But the second, I would say, best thing about Duke was my major. And I had John Hope Franklin, Skip Gates, were like my professors. C. Eric Lincoln was my professor. Like these are sort of three giants in the field of African American studies. While I was there, and even as a young student, not with the perspective of hindsight, you even recognize even more how much of a how much they were giants in the field. But even in that moment, I would go to class and I knew that I was like in the space of greatness. I will never forget having a crush, professional crush on, John Hope Franklin, and him walking past, overhearing me talk about him and walking up and saying hello. I was like, oh, sitting in the front row of C. Eric Lincoln's class. Just all of those things were amazing. So why did I choose it? I knew that I was going to law school. I'm a lawyer now, knew I was going to law school, and everyone told me that you want to do English, as a major, because you need to be a good writer, you need to be a good logical thinker. So that was one of the pathways to that. So English, but then I always had a heart and a passion for African American studies. So together, integrated, it was a perfect combination of majors for me. Great question. So immediately after Duke, I went to law school. And then after law school, my very first job was at well, actually, where I am now is the Georgetown Juvenile Justice Clinic. So at Georgetown Law, there was a 2-year fellowship where I represented children accused of delinquency in DC local courthouses. And also, as a part of that fellowship, I began to learn how to be a teacher. So, a lawyer and a teacher. I was sort of in training in those 2 years. After I did that 2-year fellowship at Georgetown, I then went to the DC Public Defender Service and I represented kids for 4 years there. Again, really specializing in youth justice and youth advocacy. And then I came back to Georgetown Law School as a law professor. And so I love it here. So I am now, many years later, the director of the Juvenile Justice Clinic and Initiative. And we represent clients in DC Superior Court. I teach law students in a year-long, really what amounts to almost an apprenticeship during their 3rd year of law school. But then in addition to that, we do systemic reform around improving criminal justice, reducing the criminalization of Black children. I do speaking and teaching and training all across the country, serve as an expert witness and consultant, and I write and publish. And so that's what I'm doing now. As I look back over my career, I think one of the most important things that I've seen and that I would offer to other people, or just to to folks coming behind me is that there are your toolbox is full and that there are many tools in the toolbox. And so when I came in, I knew I wanted to do direct representation, directly be, on the front lines with young people in the system. And so I still recommend that, highly recommend that as a first job. Seeing if you want to make a difference in the world, get proximate, right? As we often hear Brian Stevenson say that, getting proximate to the people who are most impacted. So that's a piece of advice that I would stand by. But as I grew in my career, I recognized that actually there are tons of tools in the toolbox. And so learning how to do legislative advocacy, policy reform, coalition building, storytelling, right? Youth engagement, not just in the courtroom, but in the community engagement. All of those tools in the toolbox are important. Writing op-eds, being at the table in interdisciplinary conversations, training other state actors or systems actors really became important. And I think I came into the work pretty siloed, right? And your heart is going to lead you where your foundation for me is direct representation. But teaching, I love teaching as much as I love direct representation. And so understanding that your career, over time should have all of, or can have all of those buckets, same way to achieve the same outcomes. And so I will say that one of the most significant things that I stumbled upon is I actually ended up writing a book, The Rage of Innocence, right? How America criminalizes Black youth. And I never set out in my career to think, oh, I'm going to write a book one day. But as I did the work that I have been doing, it became clear to me that I wanted to blow up the whole juvenile court system. And so, short of doing that, I wanted to like help the rest of the world see what was happening. And so I ended up writing this book that it's chock full of stories about Black children who've ended up in the system, but also it's interwoven in very plain language some of the research and the data showing how Black children are criminalized and suffer great trauma and psychological, unrest and anxiety as a result of all of that police engagement and criminalization, and then offering ways forward. And so I think that has been one of the most amazing learning moments in my career is like you wake up and you realize, no, everybody needs to hear this story. So how am I going to do storytelling? As willing and to step outside your comfort zone, right? And try new things. My father always used to say that, what's the worst thing that can happen if you ask? The worst thing they can say is no, and you keep on going. But like if there's an opportunity that is not available to you at face value, can I create that opportunity? So a perfect example of that was when I went to law school. So I teach in a clinical program now at Georgetown Law School. And like I said, I teach third year law students how to represent kids in court. Well, when I was in law school, we had clinical programs, but we did not have a clinical program in delinquency court, right? We had it in special education and we had it in, abuse and neglect, but not in delinquency court, which is where, the kids are abandoned. You send the kids, you call them bad kids, and send them there. And so what I wanted to do was to start a new clinic. And so I, along with one other student in my law school, went to the professors and said, let's start a new clinic. And so had we not asked, that never would have happened. And so you got to create opportunity where opportunity, does not exist. So I'm easy to find in modern day contemporary, what do you call it? Listen to me. I sound old now, but on the internet is all I was trying to say, which is that, I'm at Georgetown Law School, easy to find on the Georgetown Juvenile Justice website, but I can give you my contact information. Email is one of the best ways to reach me. So, and that is just HENNINK at georgetown.edu. I really do think that's the best way to reach me. I know what all of you all are waiting to hear. Am I on social media? Yes. I've got a LinkedIn profile, easy to find, probably under Professor Kristin Henning. Is probably, I believe my name. I'm on IG as I also think I'm at Prof. Chris Henning. I have a Facebook page also. Prof. Chris Henning. Don't bother to TikTok me because I'm probably not going to check it. I do have a profile there, but I'm pretty easy to find.